and welcome everyone to my cooking show. I bet you didn't know this, but I am actually a world-renowned chef. That's right, you heard it right. I'm a world-renowned chef. Just kidding. I'm actually just pretending. It's kind of easy to pretend to be something that you're not when you have this cool costume, but I should probably take it off because it's not really who I am at all. I like to cook, but I'm not a world-renowned chef. No one knows me as a chef. This month we're talking about integrity, about being truthful about who and what you really are. So I'm going to take this off and we're going to take a look at some characters that we find in the Bible who show us great examples of integrity. Integrity is choosing to be truthful in whatever you say and do. Hey, I'm back. So as you can see, it's me, Miss Stacey. I'm really just a children's minister. I'm not a chef, but since we're in the kitchen, I decided that maybe we can use some objects found in our kitchen to tell our Bible story. Like I said, we're going to be looking at characters from our Bible who show integrity. And today, I want to look at a story from the book of Daniel. That's in the Old Testament. First character that I'd like to introduce you to is Daniel. Do you recognize this guy? You might remember a story in the Bible about Daniel when he was in the lion's den. But the story that we're going to learn about today takes place earlier than that, when Daniel was a young man, maybe even a teenager. So here's Daniel, and these are Daniel's 3 friends. And there was a king who was ruling all over Judah in Babylon, and his name was King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar. Do you think you could spell that? Nebuchadnezzar? King Nebuchadnezzar did not respect God or God's people. King Nebuchadnezzar even went into God's temple and took some things for himself. He also took some of God's people, the Israelites. He did this because he didn't want them to gain power and take some of his power away from him. So I want to introduce you to both of our sets here. We have the Babylonians, and then we also have the Israelites. And we know from our Bible that the Israelites are God's chosen people. So we've already met Daniel here, and we know that these are some of his friends. Representing the Babylonians, we have King Nebuchadnezzar himself, the man that's in charge. And then we have his court official. This is Ashpenaz. And then we have these guards here that are keeping watch over all of the things in the Babylonian Empire. Here's the head guard. But you can see he has a whole army of guards. And he asked his chief advisor, his helper, Ashpenaz, he said, I want you to go out into the kingdom and I want you to look for some young men that are strong and healthy and have them come into my palace and let's train them. Let's train them to help us so that they'll be on our side, so they won't come rise up in power and try to take us over. So that's exactly what Ashpenaz did. He went out and he searched around and he found Daniel and he found his 3 friends, and he asked them to come to the palace and train to work for King Nebuchadnezzar. So Ashpenaz brought Daniel and his friends into the palace and began to teach them. He actually taught them for 3 years. They taught them how to read and how to write and about all of the history from Babylon. They wanted them to become as much like the Babylonians as possible. But you got to remember that Daniel and his friends, they were Israelites. They were good. They worshiped the one true God. And so they came and they obeyed the orders, but they remained true to who they really were, and they remained true to who God wanted them to be. They decided that it would be even a good idea if they changed their names. So they took their Israelite names and changed them, and they changed their names to, you may have heard of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They also changed Daniel's name to be a Babylonian name. They changed Daniel's name to Belteshazzar. But we don't hear him referred to that much as Belteshazzar because he wrote this book of the Bible and he refers to himself as Daniel. But we know these guys as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar was really wanting to make sure that Ashpenaz was making sure that these new trainees were becoming as much like the Babylonians as possible. I want to invite them to come and eat and feast on the king's table. Well, this would be a pretty cool treat. Most people didn't get to eat from the king's table because it was made specially for the king. But he wanted to make sure that these guys started to really become more like the Babylonians, and so he invited them to eat. Well, a lot of the things that the Babylonians and King Nebuchadnezzar ate were not pleasing to the Israelites. They weren't pleasing to what God had asked them to not eat. And so Daniel thought, oh, we want to follow the rules and we want to do what we're supposed to do, but we also want to remain true to the one true God that we worship. And so I don't know that we can eat the things from the king's table. So Daniel, he didn't want to dishonor God, but he went and talked to Ashpenaz and he asked him, would it be okay if we keep eating our food instead of eating the king's table's food? And Ashpenaz thought, well, that is just crazy. Why wouldn't you want to eat all of this delicious food? King Nebuchadnezzar has given this rule because he wants to make sure that all of these young men are well fed and they're growing and they're strong. And if you don't eat the same food as all the other trainees, you might not look as well fed as they do. You might look kind of scrawny, and Ashpenaz was scared that King Nebuchadnezzar might kill him if he gave them permission not to eat from the king's table. Remember, King Nebuchadnezzar was doing all of this so that they would become more like the Babylonians. When Daniel realized that Ashpenaz wasn't really going to go for it, he went to the guard. He went to the head guard and he asked him, he said, okay, I have this idea. What if you put us to the test and you let me and my friends eat only vegetables and drink only water? Put it to the test and let us try it for 10 days. And after 10 days, you can be the judge of whether you think that we're healthy and strong. Well, the guard thought about it and he decided, okay, we'll give it a try. We'll see what happens after 10 days. We'll see how you look, and we'll see if you look as healthy and as strong as the rest of the young men who were eating all of the delicious food from King Nebuchadnezzar's table. 10 days passed, and Daniel and his friends have only been eating vegetables and drinking water. And guess what? They look just as strong and just as healthy as all of the other men who've been feasting at the table. In fact, they even look stronger. They look better than the rest of the guys. And so the guard allows them to continue and they keep eating their vegetables. Now, I want you to know that Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't do this for themselves. They didn't do this to prove a point for themselves. They did this because they wanted to honor God. They wanted to honor what God had told them to do, and God had asked them to not eat certain foods. And so that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to honor God. God continued to bless them and take care of them. God continued to make them healthy. And Daniel even began to have the ability to understand other people's dreams, to understand what they meant. So at the end of the 3 years of training, Ashpenaz brought Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego before King Nebuchadnezzar so that he could talk to them and he could see how they were doing. And he began to ask them questions. Well, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had continued to grow and they were wise. They were able to listen and understand the things that the king was asking them, and they were replying with great wisdom. The other men who had been in training at the same time, they were trying to do all kinds of crazy things to get King Nebuchadnezzar's attention, but it didn't work. King Nebuchadnezzar recognized that Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a wisdom, and he listened to their authority. He listened and trusted them. Daniel and his friends were in a tough situation. They were in a faraway land. They were with new people that they did not know. These new people were asking them to do new things, and not all of these new things fit in with what God wanted them to do. But Daniel and his friends continued to live with integrity. They could have been tempted to change what they were doing just to fit in, but they didn't. They held true to what they knew God wanted them to do. Every day we have to choose to live with integrity too. That might mean that we don't play certain video games, or we don't watch certain shows. It might mean that we don't dress super cool to try to fit in with people who are popular. It might mean that we have to stand up for what's right. So I want you to remember to stay true to who you are. Stay true to who God has called you to be. Live the life that God designed for you. You will never regret it. We want you to live with integrity.